Welcome to this, the latest in our Future of Software Quality Assurance series. I'm delighted, I'm Justin Trenner, by the way. I'm one of the directors of QA Financial, and I'm delighted to introduce this webinar sponsored by Parasoft on the impact of virtualization on quality and benchmarking performance. We will have a number of guest speakers, Raymond Smit, who is IT chapter lead at ING for quality, and Istiak Ahmed, SVP in software quality assurance for Bank of America. We'll also be hearing from Matt Klassen, the CMO of Parasoft. But before we do, just a few words of introduction. With the increase in release velocity that we are constantly seeing, with the need to ensure that software responds to software risks, and there's a wider sense of what software risk and what resilience means, the pressure is on to improve speed to market. The challenge that most of us face is how do we ensure that we improve speed to market while showing value for money and while ensuring that we are proving that value for money at the same time. One of the keys to the route to getting software out there faster and at higher quality lies in the three elements that we're going to focus on today. Virtualization, service virtualization, having the right test data prepared, and focusing on the integrations that can make all the difference between a rapid rollout and an unsuccessful or greatly slowed rollout. We've done some research in the area, and what we've seen is that of the total IT spend on the right-hand side of this graphic, the 800 billion a year that major financial firms spend on software development and maintenance, as much as a quarter of that total spend goes fixing the green area, fixing or duplicating other efforts, and a bit less than a quarter goes specifically on quality engineering, specifically on testing and on fixing as part of the formal QA process. So there's a lot of value to be recaptured by having more efficient development processes. When we look at where the value gets lost, where we've developed some measures of our own, and we've seen that whereas the established and also fintech firms may compete, what we find is that the fintech firms who've adopted a hybrid methodology have a surprising willingness to allow significant defects, critical defects, to escape to production. But what they compensate that with is a very rapid remediation effect. And critical defects are not critical defects in the traditional sense. On our measure, it is. So some defects that are considered critical, in fact, are tolerable if they force you to reboot, but don't force the software to misbehave. You can put up with that so long as the vendor sorts or the financial firm sorts that defect quickly. So what we're seeing is a transition to a hybrid model, what gets called Agile sometimes, with a change in approach to defects, where you allow certain defects to get to users who are the most effective testers, so long as you remediate quickly. That can drive an overall efficiency where the most efficient development model turns out to be a hybrid, Agile, a combination of elements of waterfall, elements of Agile. And that's true both for established firms, the big blue circle, and for fintechs who've been designed that way from the ground up. When we look at using our measures to assess the effectiveness and the value of virtualization, and specifically we've looked at a number of banks and their use of Parasoft Virtualize, we see that implementing Virtualize resulted in project lengths reducing by nearly 40%, and more than 3/4 decrease in overrun times. Also an increase in discovery of bugs in the QA and testing phase, and a 74% decrease in critical defect escape ratio. So implementing the right effective measures and measuring your progress as you implement those measures seems to be a key to getting better outcomes and getting them a whole lot faster. On the right-hand side, there's just some description of how we reach these conclusions. So we've got some key themes there. We've got the key ideas that getting software to market faster requires us to do a better job of virtualizing, a better job of replicating the real world through virtualization, having the right test data, having the right measures so that you can measure your own progress in delivering quality to recapture some of that potentially 25% of all IT spend that is, putting it bluntly, wasted. That's what we saw on that earlier chart. To explore some of these themes, I'm delighted to welcome to the webinar Raymond Smit and Istiak Ahmed. Raymond is the IT chapter lead for quality at ING, as I mentioned a moment ago, and Istiak is responsible for quality engineering at Bank of America, SVP. Raymond and Istiak, can I invite you to perhaps open your mics and turn on your screens? Great to see you. And let me stop my sharing so that our audience can see us more clearly on their screens.
Hi there.
So welcome, Raymond. Welcome, Istiak. Can I start by asking you, Raymond, to just describe a bit more fully what you do and where you are on your development journey?
Okay. Well, actually, I'm working together with several teams, and we're working on improvements of the whole delivery process of our software. The challenges we have are mostly the availability of the test environments. The application we have is working together with a lot of other systems in a chain. It's about 26 endpoints we are using. And it's very difficult, of course, if you have several teams working on the same application with several test environments. So it was always very difficult to do your test in time. You plan some time for testing, the teams actually, and then in order to do the test, they need their environment as well. So we simulate them on a simple way, but it's not the live situation. So that's why we came up with Virtualize, so that we could record the behavior of each endpoint, let's say interface. And in this way, we should have a stable test environment to do our test against. And we're middle in the journey of that, because it's a lot of work to implement those total landscape of systems we need, and all the behaviors, and during the normal day of working, of course. But I think we're on schedule, and it works very good at this moment. But we're not there yet, but we're pretty far.
Thank you. Yeah. And Istiak, can I invite you to do the same? Tell us a little bit more about what you do.
Yeah, I'm in the enterprise team. So where I come in is, we basically drive the standards and the testing process within the bank. And one of the things that we have been driving is the CI/CD process, and DevOps and all that. So where I come in is basically we built a testing harness that works with all the different teams. They can run the automated tests in the testing harness, and it will become part of the CI/CD. They can schedule, they can trigger, they can do all kinds of stuff. But what we really drive up in the process is, since a lot of us are agile, we have things that in a way you see last minute defects and all that. So we have been trying to shift the testing left, and and one of the key to that is virtualization, where you can run your test earlier and get your idea of what the defects are and all that beforehand. And one of the key things is also when we do migration of platforms, we have a lot of services that are built, especially microservices. And when other teams are waiting for that to ingest the data into their applications, they don't have to wait. They can start building and testing with virtual assets beforehand. And the other key thing that we have seen is that our performance team used one tool in the past. Some of our function teams used a different tool. Some our developers are using a different tool, and a lot of the teams were building their own custom tools for middleware testing. So what we did was we kind of settled on one tool, and now our performance team as well as our function teams and all are using that one tool, and we have made a lot of progress in that. So that is saving us a lot of time, a lot of teams' time in those who are spending time building their own tools and doing all these different things. Right now, if a developer builds something, then the QA person can use it, and the QA person, whatever they build, the performance team can use it, and so the synergy built from that itself is a saver for us. So that's one of the key things, that all of these things is what we try to drive in the bank.
So you both talked about the benefits of coming closer to replicating the future production world by having consistent availability through virtualization of the different components that any given development is integrating to. How do you ensure version control so that each microservice that's represented in your virtual world is the most current, is the one that's presently in production?
One of the things, well, two things. We have, we use Bitbucket to do version control, and we also have a registry for all the services where somebody can register their service and other people can look at it and reuse it. So we have, these two methods of, make sure that we have the latest version available that you can see in Bitbucket. Also that, people can see what they are from the registry.
And Raymond, do you find that's a source of challenge?
The data, you mean? The test data?
No, that actually across the virtual estate, you have the most current versions of each solution or each application.
Yeah, because when you look at our situation, the environment is mostly stable. So we don't have that version issues, but yeah, we have automated almost the complete development pipeline, like with CI/CD. We use Azure DevOps for that. We also have a test automation we do with Selenium, and we have 500 test scripts, and we also maintain the test data for that. And all the endpoints are pretty stable at our department, which we use, and we don't have the issues with a lot of different versions with the endpoints we are using. We have good control of that.
So you said that one of the key areas of challenge is ensuring that you have effective test data on demand. I think that's something that you've been working on recently.
Yeah, we have something within the bank which we called Connected T, so that there is a daily meeting with all we align all the test environments every day. There's a special team for that over the bank, especially for instance, the customer relation systems. We know exactly what our test data is, and it's always in line with the other systems that we are using, we are consuming. And yeah, we keep in track on a daily basis with that.
And Istiak, I'm going to bring you the same question. Before I do, apologies, I should have mentioned at the top, if any of our attendees wish to fire any questions to any of us, towards the bottom of your screen, you'll see Q&A towards the bottom right on the ribbon. It might be at the top if you've joined us on an iPad or a tablet. If you click on Q&A, you can submit a question to us, and we'll see that here. So please do share any questions that you may have with us. So Istiak, just to bring back the same issue to you, how do you ensure the high availability or the ready availability of test data?
We have bought a tool to kind of virtualize our databases as well, and we also have an in-house tool to mine, reserve, and use the data. Between the combination of these two is how we try to mitigate our data needs. We have a lot of different scenarios for data because we have a lot of organizations, a lot of different core businesses that we deal with. So we, each of them have different data needs. So some are closer to to the user where you get the data right away. You can use injection and those kind of things. But some are way down where it goes through a whole bunch of processes and all that. So for those, we definitely have to let the data flow through the whole process. There's no way of really simulating that. So to reach a certain condition, so then we use that data. But that initial preparation of data is done with with our data virtualization as well as our in-house tool. Where possible, we definitely use Virtualize, where we can simulate them. Those are for services, right? But for anything that is non-services, we have to use these other means to get the data right.
And how do you ensure that the data is current? Because it's one thing having a virtualized data tool. It's another thing making sure that it reflects the most recent, not just data description of data, yeah, but dirtiness of data as well. But it's appropriate to the real world.
So we have to get the data from a subset of the data from production, and we do that every 3 months or whatever, 6 months, according to the organizations. And we, refresh those, and then we, use that to virtualize and all that.
Yeah.
But we do, like I said, we have another in-house tool that can, it can mine and then set up, some of the data, especially dates, which will go in, and the tester can go and update the dates to make them more current, so that when you hit those boundary conditions, you're still within those boundary conditions. Mm-hmm. So we use that as well to make sure the data is within sync.
Yeah, we have a similar thing. We have a similar thing, Justin. We have after each deployment, we have in the deployment pipeline, we also build in an automated function that copies the database, and also from production, and we use part of it, of course, after scrambling, and that's also in the pipeline. So after each cycle, we have a release cycle of 2 weeks. Every 2 weeks, we have a new release, and the database is being copied to an acceptance environment and also encrypted, like our standards for our standards, according to the law, rules. And that's the way we keep in track with the current data every release.
Yeah, definitely we have to scramble and all that.
Yeah, exactly.
So one of the, or something that you both said, that virtualization and having test data on demand has allowed you to ensure that you don't have colleagues queuing up to create a test environment. You can actually be running multiple test environments at the same time. Has that been a key to speeding up endpoint software delivery?
Yes, I mean, in the past, we spent, I would say up to 40% of the time in data setup. And that time has gone down significantly, I think, for people who are using those processes now. So yeah, definitely, I would say so.
Indeed, one of our attendees asks if you can pinpoint where you see the biggest value of service virtualization. Is it in outputting software at better quality? Is it that you don't have people hanging around looking for a test environment or waiting for a test environment? Is it more control of the test data? But where would you see as the main benefits of service virtualization?
For us, I would say the main benefit is finding the defects early, and and not having to wait around and not having to worry about downtime and all that, and also the fact that you can create different scenarios pretty quickly, and you can also run through and find your defects much earlier. So I would say the service virtualization comes in very useful over there, as well as for our performance team. They would not be able to do performance testing in a lot of cases without these virtual assets. They have created a huge number of virtual assets because of to be able to do all this performance testing.
Yeah, for us, the benefits are mostly when we are also using a lot of suppliers which are building software for us, and we're also busy with the shift to the left improvements. So what we want to do is we containerize our virtualized services and hand them over to our suppliers, so they can test against the context of our system landscape. So we have the findings during the building phase already at the suppliers, but also our teams, which are also using, of course, our test environments. We can now, they even can build locally and test locally as in a production situation. So they can also use the containers on their own machines locally and test against all the interfaces we have, which we couldn't do that before.
I think if I can also provide an answer to Albert, the gentleman who placed the question. From the measuring that we've done with our QFH analytics, we can see that API-related defects cost twice as much to fix as non-API defects. And as I showed on the slide a little earlier, we see an acceleration in time to market where virtualization has been applied. And we see, yes, a reduction in defects or catching defects earlier, as Istiak mentioned, but also the sheer net of that is speedier to market with the same resources, which means that your resources are spending less time spinning wheels. So one of the challenges that I would say that I would observe as a market analyst is that people know that they have a problem, and they know that the world has got better, but the CFO is saying, yeah, but what's the value of that? And I think one of the things that we've done with the analysis that we've been able to do with Raymond and Istiak's help is to provide some hard numbers that show a real financial benefit, a time to market benefit, but that translates into a hard financial benefit of the application of virtualization, and taking virtualization to encompass both service virtualization and test data, because it's great having the right infrastructure, but if you don't have the right test data, you can still be waiting around. Would you agree? Would you nuance anything that I've said, Raymond or Istiak?
Yeah, definitely. I think you're right on with that.
Yeah, I agree with that. Yeah.
You've both been facilitating a journey that's moved from waterfall towards agile. You're both at shops where much of what you do is pretty much agile, but you're servicing development groups that are still somehow, or components are still waterfall. What do you see as the key challenges of integrating parts waterfall, part agile?
Yeah, the most of the challenges we now have, because we are working since 2015 in an agile way. We work with biz dev ops teams, so the business is also a part of the team. But what we mostly see is the autonomy, the behavior of the engineers, like being being an entrepreneur. So it's not even the technical skills which are what is the challenge. It's mostly the behavior of the people, like being your own team and taking ownership of your asset. And that's something we didn't foresee when we started the whole.
So you can design all you like, but if you don't take care of the people,
exactly.
So bring people on the journey, it's still
And what you expect from what you expect from a high performing team is that they also make their own improvements, and sometimes they're in a funnel that they they don't have time to do their own improvements, and that's something you should do as a high performing team, I guess. But
if you'll allow me a little joke, I often say that I spent a lot of years in this space as a consultant, and I often say that the job of being a consultant is often a form of marriage guidance counseling. And I think that's part of what we're talking about here. Istiak, have you seen some of the same challenges?
Yeah, definitely, it's a culture shift. I mean, it takes a while for people to get onto agile methodology and all that. We had to have several rounds of training and all that, and emphasize from the PO, Scrum Master, all the way down that, hey, this is the way we have to work, and you have more independence, but the key thing is to put working software out there as fast as possible, working software with high quality. So that's the key part of agile, that we emphasize that, hey, this is the whole goal of agile. If you're not doing that, then we are not really getting the fruits of agile. So that's how we it's been I think we're over the hump right now. But it took a while to get over the hump.
Exactly. Yeah.
So I'm going to come back to Raymond and Istiak in a few moments. I've got a couple of questions that have come in from our attendees, which I will share with you and ask you in a couple of moments. But I'm just going to jump away and thank Raymond and Istiak very much for their contribution up till now. And I'm going to come to Matt Klassen. Matt is the CMO at Parasoft. And so I'm delighted to welcome you, Matt, to our webinar, and invite you to tell us a little bit about we hear people wrestling from going from the theory of DevOps to practical implementations. So how do you help people address that challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think everybody in the world of software has been impacted significantly by some of the modern trends, from agile to CI/CD to DevOps, and we see that obviously across pretty much every single one of our customers that we come in contact with. And so, and while I think there's been huge strides in a lot of those practices, in integration of those tool chains, I think a lot of customers still struggle ultimately with integrating key testing, compliance, security, quality, right? Both practices and tooling. I think the focus has been significantly on speed, and I think what happens a lot of times is they still tend to put, even in a CI/CD diagram, whether you have it as a straight line sort of pipeline, or you have it as a kind of an infinity diagram, which is just this continuous delivery, right? there's this step called testing, and unfortunately, you can't test quality into a product, and so it's really critical that organizations integrate those processes, those tools, they automate them, and you heard really both from Raymond and Istiak, right? This notion of shift left, that they actually have taken this to heart. We hear this. I think a lot of our customers struggle with it. They pay lip service. I think some of the struggles come from maybe a little bit of a wrong focus in testing, and I say wrong focus. So if you were to say, if you ask most organizations, how many test cases do you have? That could range, or even automated test cases, manual test cases, right? First of all, they're shifting to automated, and it might be in the hundreds or even thousands. And then if you ask them, well, what kinds of test cases are those, right? Majority of organizations would say, well, we're using Selenium, or we're using some other sort of UI functional, web interface, maybe mobile, but it's really a UI testing, testing set of technologies and test cases. And unfortunately, they implement those at the end, right? Think about it. You have to have a working system. You have to have, the ability to have an environment set up, and as a result, they're really delayed in running those, both in a given release cycle, but then across multiple release cycles, it's delayed. And so it also takes a long time to execute those, to build them. They're volatile. Maintaining them is very difficult. And so that shift left is extremely important as you think about and embrace really the essence of CI/CD and DevOps. And so I think that's one of the struggles that we're seeing.
And I put your slide up on the screen, that describes that, but that still implies a stepwise progression as we move to the DevOps world, and you go from this linear to the circular description. Isn't one of the key problems having the right data available and resetting and making sure it's genuinely available on demand?
It is. It's, in fact, I think one of our customers, in fact, it might have been Raymond or Istiak talked about this the other day in terms of metrics and measurement, and I'm not sure they mentioned it today, but that some of our customers are experiencing that, if you think about the amount of time to test, if you include the preparation of the environment as the entire time to do QA, some organizations are spending up to 40 or 50% of that entire cycle of QA cycle on test data management, right? Just trying to get test data prepared, et cetera. And what happens is, again, a lot of times when we rely on, there's all sorts of problems relying on actual, production copies of data. When is it available? Are there privacy issues? Are there, there's a whole bunch of potential issues as you spread that around the organization and use it, in your testing efforts. So I think a key is, and I think you heard it from Istiak and Raymond, they're both taking an approach where they're providing a service, a real-time, always on, always available service to multiple, not just a single development group, but multiple development groups across the organization. And part of the service they're providing, right, is an integrated tool set and an integrated set of services that allow developers to test much earlier in the dev cycle, even locally. I think I forget it was Raymond or Istiak said they could using basically using containers. They could actually test locally and have a full environment available to them through virtual services, both data and services. And this insulates effectively, right? this insulates that developer from having to wait or having all these dependencies that would cause them to not be able to test adequately. And that goes all the way through. I mean, I think at the end of the day, the key here is every one of these things: code quality, static analysis, unit testing, code coverage, API testing, service and data virtualization. All of those things should happen, as just kind of by nature, by the way the system, the CI/CD and DevOps pipeline is set up. It has to sort of happen automatically. So yeah.
And I guess that always on concept is one that's been a key impact of the pandemic. That just like our customers want to be able to access the financial institution at all times, so our developers may want to be doing development, may want to be updating code, not just within specific windows, may want to be doing releases out of a historically normal cycle. So I guess that's that interdependency which you describe in the second slide is one that requires you to have a consistent infrastructure managed from the center.
Yeah, so if this in this diagram here, right, that center cylinder there is, kind of a modern microservices-based application. And if you think about this move, we kind of step back and think about, the complexity that we have in front of us. We've gone from, monolithic applications. For good reasons, we've moved to these services-oriented, service-based, microservices-based architectures. And there's some really, really good reasons to do that. But the one thing is that, what used to be maybe a monolithic application is now deployed as a set of, 100 services. Now think about multiplying that across all of the other applications that it might have been dependent upon. So if it was in the past dependent upon, 3, 4, 5 other applications or services, or, now it could be hundreds that's dependent upon. So now not only is this application, made up of many, many, many different services, it's dependent upon many, and it kind of multiplies out. In fact, there was an article written where one fellow interviewed a set of professionals in, both leaders in development and leaders in QA. And one of the quotes was, we should be not surprised. We should be more surprised effectively that things more or less work. Okay. This we should be more, surprised because of the complexity, of these environments. And so if you think about now, if you don't have a good approach to sort of taking a centralized approach to virtualizing those services, it sort of becomes a nightmare. In fact, another customer of ours actually called it, they called it untestable, right? So when they came into an engagement with us, they're like, this is completely untestable. We have no way of actually doing this. And of course, the quote is that they were able to test the untestable in the end. So, which is a pretty common scenario. It takes some time, obviously. It doesn't happen overnight, but has a huge impact on the organization as a whole. And I think, again, we've seen customers reduce that time to create that environment, manage that environment for 40-50% of their dev cycle or QA cycle, to maybe 10 to 15 or 20%, which has a huge impact.
Well, you talk about testing the untestable. I guess a different way of expressing that is testing the unexpected, which is a good cue for me to bring Raymond and Istiak back into the conversation. We're going to take a couple of questions, but I'm going to start with a question of my own that's very current. And that is, if we're talking about testing the unexpected, in the last week, we've had a financial event. I guess we've had a geopolitical event that's had a financial consequence that none of us has seen truthfully in our lifetime, which is we're used to the idea of sanctions checking, compliance, and so on and so forth. What we're not really used to is the idea of actual financial instruments that are running, that are extant, maybe long-term swaps, other instruments that are suddenly payment streams are going to be interrupted. We've probably not designed our systems around the kind of event that we've seen over the last 2, 3, 4 days. How does that impact your test environment? I mean, I would imagine that having a virtualized, always-on test environment is a pre-made solution, in the sense that other colleagues will be developing other software solutions for to help your institutions remain in compliance, but you're going to need to provide the test harness for that. Has there been an immediate impact of testing the unexpected in the last few days?
Well, at our company, we have more restriction on changes because we have, of course, also people working even in Ukraine, and also other countries which are also might be affected by specific financial measurements. But yeah, the department where the process where we're working on is the mortgage process of the Netherlands. And in that case, we have not so much issues regarding these financial measurements they're taking now. But the only thing what affect us is the thing that we are not able to change as easy as we normally do. We have some more strict regulation in order to see is there because of cyber crimes, those kind of things. We have to be careful for that. So that's why we in these the coming weeks we are pretty careful with the changes we're doing. But for the testing part, it's it doesn't affect mostly not our environments at this moment.
And from Bank of America's point of view, Istiak?
Well, so far I think we have not seen as much impact. I mean, of course, from payments, if there is, then we use virtualization to do our testing and all that. And but we are still in the analysis phase of what the impact would be and all that. So that's pretty much where we are.
What I mostly see is that it has more effect on people than on the systems at this moment. Outside.
So I have a question that's coming from Dominic. Dominic wants to know. I'm going to slightly rephrase this question, but he asks, when you use real data in your test environments, how do you ensure that any compliance or regulator requirements are met regarding the reuse of that data?
Yeah, well,
real data.
We are working. We have a we do several audits, especially on the data, but we are using a specific. We have an automated process for. We use production data, but we also encrypt it with specific rules, which are complying to the GDPR rules we have. So we take care of that, of course, as a bank.
And we do the same. We take a subset, and it's automated, and we, scramble it and encrypt it and populate our test environment.
Scramble, yeah, exactly.
Do you also use? I'm just curious. Do you also use synthetic or virtual data in certain instances versus copies of, copies and then encrypting or scrambling existing data?
Yeah, there are some teams that do use synthetic data, definitely.
Yeah, we also do that. Especially with documents, because we don't use the production documents mostly. Because
another question from our audience. Do you simulate full end-to-end environments? I assume that will be too complex. If that is too complex, how do you decide how to slice what's your approach to that? Go ahead.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the most complex issues when you're doing end-to-end testing and your data has to flow through several applications to come to the last stage where you might be you might be sending in 100 accounts, and at the end of the day you get 2 accounts that meet the criteria for the end stage application, the last application that's at the tail end to do the testing. And so what we do is we try to look at all the scenarios and see which is where we'll get the best hits, and get the most out of that. But that's where virtualization actually comes in much more handy. If you have virtualization, then you can create it right there at that stage itself, without having to go through all this filtration process from each application. But it's all on the rules. You have to know all the rules. If you want to have the data flow through all the applications and come to the stage where you are testing, you have to know all the rules of the upstream applications, and then get your data to meet those conditions, and then come all the way down, which is very complex, right? So the easy way out would be virtualization on that.
Yeah, and yeah, from our part, we virtualize as much as possible. But when you want to test a chain, for example, end to end, we only focus on that part, and the rest of the interfaces we need, just on technical reasons, we try to virtualize those interfaces so that you can make agreements with the parties you need to do your end-to-end testing. We make agreements on that with them and look at exactly the whole chain, and then do our tests. Before we had virtualization, we had to have all the other chain partners in the cooperating in the tests as well, and that was the most difficult part, to have everyone online aligned. So that with virtualization, it makes it much easier this way.
In the traditional or historic development world, one used to think of 3 environments: the dev, the UAT, and then prod. Does the use of virtualization allow you, in effect, to get rid of one of those environments entirely?
Not
or
yet.
Do you still operate them in parallel?
In parallel, yeah. We also use virtualized services also with our performance tests, and we have a special production-like environment for that. So, which is a copy of production, and for our test environment, we test more the function and the new features we have. But in an production acceptance test, we look at performance and NFRs, and that's where we now also use. We want to use, not yet, but we want to use the virtual services as well.
And you, Istiak, have you managed to get rid of any of those real environments, or
not yet? We still have all the environments, but it is definitely an aspiration to get rid of at least one.
Well, look, that seems like a good point to wrap up, and thank you both very much, and thank you as well, Matt. We've had a very interesting conversation. We will make a copy of this webinar available online for anybody who wants to go back over and review any part, or wants to share it with colleagues who weren't able to attend today. Please reach out to Matt and the team at Parasoft for more information on their virtualization offering, which can decrease your overrun times apparently by 77%, as according to the analysis that we've done, and increase the speed to market, reduce defect escape by increasing defect discovery in testing. Please reach out to me for any further information on QA vector analytics to measure the quality, efficiency, and ROI of your software development process. And watch out for emails in the coming days with a short report summarizing key issues that we've discussed today, and for the link to the online version of this webinar. Once again, thank you so much, Raymond. Thank you, Istiak. Thank you, Matt, for your contributions today. And thank you, everyone, for joining us.